Hey everyone, in today's video we are talking all about math talks or number talks that you can have in a K-2 classroom. Now, just last week I was in Orlando, Florida. I presented at Get Your Teach On. It was a huge conference and I presented to over 1,200 K-2 teachers, which was amazing. If you were there, hello, let me know down in the comments. It was so much fun. I ended up doing most of my talk in the K1 room and the second grade room, all around math talk. Now in the presentations I shared a few examples of math talks I would do with my students based on K-1 standards and then again in second grade, but many teachers asked me afterwards, what types of math talks do you have with your students? And realistically, you can have a math talk about anything. Any math skill, any standard you're teaching, you're going to want to ask yourself a few questions. You're going to want to ask yourself, what conceptual knowledge do my students need to understand with this skill? What review skills do we need to go over? And what are some example type questions my students will be answering regarding the skill to show that they know how to do this skill, right? So these are questions that you want to ask yourself when making a math talk for your students. Now, that being said, there are a bunch of tried and true math talks that are already made that you can use with your students, so you don't need to be brainstorming things all the time on your own. So in today's video, I want to share 5 different math talks that are great for K-2 students. So if you're ready, give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and let's dive in. Alright, the first type of math talk that you can do with your K-2 students is simply called Fill the Grid. Now, this one looks like this right here, and I have shared this math talk before, but essentially it just has 4 boxes and a number in the middle. Now, I love this type of math talk. This is usually seen as like a number of the day, and students will complete it on their own. But I like to turn this into a math talk using those sentence stems and those phrases and really have students share their reasoning behind each of the ways they make this number. So essentially with this, any number you choose will be in the middle. And again, you're going to want to think about, where your students are and what types of things they're learning. And then they need to be challenged to come up with a few different ways that they could make this number. So here you see with the number 12, students might say, oh, this is a 10 and 2 ones. So they can do that with 10 frames down in the bottom. They could also do that with base 10 blocks. They could write out 1 10 and 2 ones, however you want to display that. And then students above can use their doubles knowledge to know that 6 plus 6 equals 12 and show an addition equation. Next to it, they can do a 3 addend addition equation, which is something my first grade students would be aware of and know how to do. And then also they can show this number using a subtraction equation. It's a very simple premise and students are tasked to fill the grid together. But again, with each way that they come up with how to make a number, they need to explain it. They need to provide reasoning and talk about it. And it's a great one to differentiate because with your kindergarten students, you can keep to the numbers 1 through 10 for a long time. You can have them show the number word up there. You can have them show manipulatives to make that number. And then with second grade students, you can go to 3 and 4 digit numbers, have them use expanded place value, have them draw base 10 cubes on there to show how to make that number, have them think of more difficult equations to go ahead and make that number. It is just a super simple way to get started with a math talk for your classroom. Math talk number 2 is called Which Doesn't Belong. Now again, this is a very simple math talk that you can use for a ton of different skills. Here you can see I just have 3 different numbers here, 11, 6, and 5. And students need to look at these numbers and determine which one doesn't belong. Again, the most important thing here is that they recognize and give a reason why it doesn't belong. So students could easily say here, oh, well, the 11 doesn't belong because 6 and 5 are both 1-digit numbers and an 11 is a 2-digit number. Or they might say the 6 doesn't belong because 11 and 5 are odd numbers and 6 is an even number. I like these because they're more open-ended and there's not always one right answer. And again, the whole importance of this type of math talk is the reasoning behind it. And with a category like which doesn't belong like this, and by picking purposeful numbers there, students can come up with a few different reasons to share their answer. Now there's a few different ways you can do this type of math talk. Here is another example, again with some numbers, but you can see that they're displayed in different ways. So we have a die showing the number 5, we have tally marks, we have a domino with with 3 and 2, which equals 5, and then we have 4 fingers being held up. So there might be a few different ways here, a few different reasons that your students give for a number that doesn't belong, but here they have to recognize numbers in a different way. They're not just listed like they were in that first one. Doing this with shapes is also another fun way to practice some geometry practice, and here we have, 3 cylinders and we have a rectangular prism, but we also have, so we could say that the juice box doesn't belong because it's a rectangular prism and the others are cylinders. But then we also have here 3 kind of food and drink items with the juice box, the can of soda, and the soup, and then we have a trash can. So we could say that the trash can doesn't belong. Again, your students might come up with some different answers. As long as their reasoning is sound, then it's a correct answer. Math talk number 4 you can have with your students is to compare numbers. Now, I shared a few different math talks in my comparing numbers video a few weeks ago. Now, always when starting a new type of math talk, I like to start a little more simple, a little more conceptual, and then work to more fluency so students have the ability to reason about this topic before we get a little more difficult. So for example, when comparing things, we start off right here where students are using the words more and less to compare a pitcher and a cup of something. So I talked about that a lot more in my comparing numbers video, so I won't go into it, but that's kind of where we would begin. And then we would move to comparing objects like this right here. Here we have 2 jars. We have 5 buttons in one jar, 4 buttons in another jar, and students would have to compare. We also have them seeing different numbers and objects in different ways. So now instead of just objects, we're seeing a 10 frame, which again is kind of still like objects, but they're put in a very specific format. And then we move on to some more fluent topics where students are actually comparing numbers. We have them start by just comparing 2 numbers at a time, and then they go on and they have 3 numbers on the board, and they have to still use those words more and less to compare those numbers. Just like with the other math talks, you can totally differentiate those for your own students. Those examples would be ones that I would probably use in K1. And then when you're moving to 2nd grade, you would definitely want to compare numbers with students to use their place value knowledge. So you might pick numbers like 334, 343, and 434. So numbers that are pretty similar, but students have to use that place value knowledge to determine which ones are more, which ones are less, and use that terminology when comparing numbers. But comparing numbers is a pretty simple one. Throw up a few numbers on the board, have students use their reasoning to compare them. Math talk number 4 to have in your classroom are picture-its. Now, this is a fun one. This is where you find a photograph and you basically just have your students talk mathematically about that photograph. So here you can see a picture of donuts, and you could probably come up with a ton of different, math problems to ask them or math questions, but I went ahead and brainstormed a few different questions for each of the images that I chose to use in my picture it unit. So here I said, how could you group or sort these donuts? How many donuts do you see? Would you say there are less than 25 sprinkles in this photo? Explain. Can you come up with a math problem using this photo? And if I wanted to share these donuts evenly, how could I do that? What are some other ways to do that? What I love about these picture it talks is it gets students to think about math in the real world. Many times they've probably seen a dozen donuts or a dozen bagels or a dozen something. And a lot of times there are some mathematical things that need to happen for parents to split up the donuts evenly, or for teachers to give out a new pack of pencils evenly, right? There's math going on there. And this helps students really think mathematically and start to talk mathematically about different things they see. Picture-its are a whole bunch of fun. Once you start doing them with your classroom, you'll start to notice different photographs that you see either in a magazine or online, and you're like, ooh, I can think of some math questions for my students to practice whatever skills they're working on. And math talk number 5 to have in your classroom is all about computation. Now, realistically, especially in 2nd grade and towards the end of the year in 1st grade, computation is going to take over a lot of our math talks because we really need students to use all the skills they've learned to solve problems, right? And we want them to recognize that they can solve problems in many different ways. So when you're teaching students different problem solving skills, like let's use the strategy making tens, when you're teaching students to make friendly numbers and make a 10, you do want to pick problems that are going to lend itself to that skill, right? You can't just pick any problem Well, you probably could, but it's not going to help students as much. You want to be very purposeful in the types of problems that you're teaching your students. So let me show you a few examples from my Making 10 math talks. And again, we start with the more simple ones. So here we have students just looking and we're asking them, what is the sum? Here we simply have 8 and we have 2. But we don't have the numbers, we have them written as 10 frames for students to look at. Very quickly, we move to some with 3 addends, and students would first, make the 10 and then add on the other 4. So they would say 2 plus 8 equals 10, and then we have plus 4 equals 14. Students can work through those and even see some examples with 4 addends before they move to some equations. And here you can see again, these are very purposeful. I have 1 plus 9. Students are going to quickly know that is a 10, and then they move on to the next problem, 9 plus 5 plus 1. Well, wait a second, I know 1 plus 9 equals 10, then we can just add the 5 on afterwards. And then I kind of switch the addends around so students recognize they can add numbers in any format. So as you can see, when we're teaching that Making 10 skill, we kind of scaffold it through our math talks, right? We get students to think about manipulatives to make 10 using those 10 frames. Then they go into 3 addends, still with the 10 frames, keep it a little more concrete. And then we move into some fluency problems where they actually just have the numbers. Now the same goes with the skill like decomposition to add. So let me just quickly show you that. These are still under the computation type of math talk, but again, you're going to teach many different strategies for teaching students how to add. So here with decomposition, we might start with a number bond. Here's the number 15, show me some ways that we can complete this. And again, there's many different ways. Students need to provide their reasoning. Then we move to something a little more difficult, like a balance where they have to complete it. And we kind of decompose already these numbers. We have 3 and 2 on one side to make 5, and then we have 4 and blank. What could go there? How did you figure that out? Students need to explain it. After we complete different balances with 2 addends and 3 addends, we move on to fluency type problems. So here's an example here. We have 9 plus 2, and I would want my students to go ahead and decompose that 2 into 1 and 1 to get 9 plus 1 plus 1. And again, through doing these math talks, they will get used to doing that. Now, that might not be the first way students solve it. When you ask them how they solved their answer, they might say, I put 9 in my head, I counted on 2 more. Which makes total sense, and you should write that down. But you do ask your students, is there another way you could do this? Could you do this using the friendly number strategy or using decomposition? And then students will tell you, oh, well, wait a sec. You could break the 2 apart, make it 1 and 1, so on and so forth. And you want to record what students are saying by using little carrots on the board and kind of showing their thinking while they explain it. And then students go on and solve 3 addend problems like this one right here, again, solving many different ways using decomposition. So both decomposition and Making 10 are computation strategies, so they kind of fall under that last umbrella there, number 5 of computation. In 2nd grade, it's going to be the same thing. There are tons of computation strategies you can teach your students. In fact, 4 of my favorite mental math strategies I share in this video right here. Go check that out if you are a 2nd grade teacher. Those are all going to be great for math talks. Now, I did want to share with you that all of the slides I shared in today's video, I actually went ahead and compiled them all into a math talk bundle that I sell over on TPT. It looks like this right here. And if you are part of the math club, this is already included in the SJT math club, so don't go ahead and purchase this on TPT. But if not, you can grab all of them on TPT and they're going to be added to. So this is a K through 2 type bundle. So in kindergarten, you have some more beginning skills. In 1st grade, you'll continue to work on those. And then again, in 2nd grade, they're going to be a lot more computation based. So while I do have them as a bundle, I am selling each one individually as well. Because if you're a 2nd grade teacher, they're probably not going to be comparing numbers, within 10, right? So I'll go ahead and link all those down below in the description in case you want to check them out. And if not, I hope this gave you at least 5 good categories for different types of math talks that you might want to have in your K through 2 classroom. I would also love to know from you, are there other types of math talks that your students really enjoy? If so, let me know down in the comments what they are. As always, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up so I know. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and click that bell. That way you're notified of every new video. See you in the next one. Bye.